He was just trying to outrun the storm. But what he found by the roadside would change everything. 3 little girls drenched, shivering, and left behind like forgotten luggage in the rain. He had no idea that taking them in would be the beginning of a miracle. If stories of love, kindness, and second chances move your heart, you're in the right place. Subscribe to our channel and stay with us. This is one you'll never forget. The rain didn't fall. It slammed like angry fists pounding the earth. Wind howled across the empty Nebraska plains, rattling loose shingles on the roof of the Whitaker ranch house. Thunder cracked like gunfire over the barn roof, sending a shiver down Sam Whitaker's spine as he leaned against the doorframe of the front porch, one hand around a mug of coffee gone cold. He wasn't afraid of storms. Not anymore. He just didn't trust what they brought. Sam turned to head inside when something so small, so faint, pierced through the downpour. A cry. It didn't belong to the wind. It wasn't the cry of any animal. He stood frozen for a beat, breath caught in his chest. Then instinct kicked in. The mug fell to the porch and shattered. Boots slapping against soaked earth. Sam grabbed the heavy flashlight by the door and sprinted through the rain. He passed the old water trough, now a shallow pool, then the corral empty, except for a few nervous horses tucked beneath the overhang. The cry came again, higher, urgent. He turned toward the birthing shed. It hadn't been used in years. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges, the walls bowed inward with age and neglect. The place was practically condemned. Lightning lit up the sky. For a brief moment, the silhouette of the shed burned white against the black. Sam hit the door shoulder first. Once. Twice. The third time it gave with a wrenching screech. What he saw inside made his heart stop. 3 little girls, huddled in the far corner beneath a drenched wool blanket, their tiny bodies shaking. Triplets, he could tell even in the dim flashlight glow. Same honey brown hair, same pale skin, same terrified eyes. One of them had no shoes. Another was trying to cover her sisters with her small, bare arms. Sam dropped to his knees. "Hey," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the storm. "You're okay now. I'm not going to hurt you." The girls didn't answer. The one in the middle flinched. "I'm Sam," he said, removing his thick flannel jacket. "I live just down the hill. You're safe now, I swear." Still no response, but their eyes followed his every move. He wrapped the jacket gently around them. It wasn't much, but it was warm and dry and smelled faintly of wood smoke. Sam pulled out his cell phone. No bars. Of course not. Not in a storm like this. Not this far out. He took a deep breath and looked at them again. "All right," he said softly. "We're going home." One by one, he lifted the girls into his arms. They were light. Too light. The wind screamed outside. The rain battered him as he stumbled back across the field, coat flapping wildly. His arms ached. His legs felt like lead. But he didn't stop. Not when thunder cracked so loud it made the ground tremble. Not when the cold bit through his soaked shirt. Not when one of the girls whimpered in her sleep. He reached the house and kicked open the door. The fire in the stove had long since died. Sam moved quickly, laying the girls down on the old couch, stripping off their wet clothing with careful hands, bundling them in every blanket he could find. He started the fire with shaking fingers, coaxing warmth back into the room. Then he sat and watched them and listened. The house was quiet except for the rain tapping the windows. The smallest of the 3 stirred. She opened her eyes, soft gray like the sky before dawn, and stared at him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Sam reached for her hand. She let him take it. He hadn't touched anyone gently in 6 years. He hadn't let himself feel anything but grief since the night his wife, Caroline, and their unborn daughter died in a car crash during a storm just like this one. He remembered the sound of the sheriff's voice over the phone. He remembered driving to the hospital, wind howling through the trees, the world a blur of sirens and disbelief. He remembered holding Caroline's hand already cold. Since that night, Sam had stopped chasing storms, stopped chasing anything. But here, in this moment, with these 3 girls asleep in his house, something old stirred in his chest. Something like purpose. Something like warmth. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of it. He didn't know who they were. He didn't know where they came from or who had left them out there to die. But he knew one thing with an aching certainty. He would not lose them. Not like before. As the wind rattled the windows and the fire crackled back to life, Sam sat with the girls through the storm. He didn't move. He didn't sleep. He just stayed, watching over 3 miracles he hadn't asked for, but maybe, just maybe, had been sent to find him. The storm passed sometime near dawn, but Sam didn't notice. He remained on the floor by the stove, back against the wall, eyes flicking between the 3 small forms bundled on the couch. The fire had settled into a gentle, pulsing glow, casting a soft warmth over the room. Outside, the world dripped and hissed with the hush of a soaked prairie. But inside, the silence was heavier, older. He hadn't slept, not because he couldn't, but because part of him was afraid to. Afraid that if he closed his eyes, the girls might vanish. That they were some strange apparition, figments of grief, conjured by lightning and memory. But each time one shifted beneath the blankets or let out a small sigh, Sam's chest squeezed in quiet relief. They were real, and they were still here. As sunlight began to press through the rain-streaked windows, Sam stood bones aching with the weight of the night. He moved slowly to the kitchen, setting water to boil. The simple ritual gave his hand something to do, while his mind stumbled through a tangle of questions he couldn't yet ask. Who were they? Where had they come from? Why had no one come looking? He poured warm water into a chipped enamel basin and returned to the living room. Kneeling beside the couch, he soaked a cloth and gently wiped the dirt from the girls' faces one by one. The eldest stirred first eyelids, fluttering open, then widening at the sight of him. She didn't scream, just stared. "Hey," he said softly. "You're okay. I'm Sam." No response. He tried again. "Can you tell me your name?" She blinked, then in a voice no louder than a whisper, "Lily." He smiled, surprised by the wave of relief that rushed through him. "That's a pretty name." She nodded toward her sisters. "June and Pearl." Sam swallowed. "Are you hungry?" Lily nodded. So did June, who'd begun to sit up, her curls tangled like wet hay. Pearl, the smallest, was still asleep, thumb tucked into her mouth. Sam stood. "All right, let's see what we can find." He hadn't cooked for anyone in years, not since Caroline. Back then, she used to hum while she stirred batter or diced onions. Sam would sit at the counter pretending to read, though he was always watching her instead. Those memories hovered now like ghosts behind every cabinet door. He found eggs and bread and made simple toast with scrambled eggs. The girls sat at the small kitchen table like tiny shadows, silent but watching his every move. "Hope you like ketchup," he said, placing a bottle beside their plates. They didn't answer, but they ate. Slowly at first, then ravenously, as if afraid it might be taken away. "Where's your mom?" Sam asked gently. No answer. "Your dad?" Still nothing. Lily looked away, and Sam didn't press. He knew that look, had seen it in the mirror once. Whatever they'd been through, it wasn't something they were ready to speak about. After breakfast, he gathered the clothes from the night before, still damp, filthy, and threw them in the wash. He rummaged through a chest in the back room and found some of Caroline's old things, small dresses, socks, a pair of soft shoes. She'd bought them before the accident, when they still believed the baby would come home. He hesitated. For a long moment, Sam just stared at the tiny garments folded in pale tissue paper. Then, with a breath that felt like breaking through ice, he brought them out. These were meant for someone else, he said to himself, but maybe they were always meant for you. The girls changed in the bathroom. When they came out, something shifted, not in the room, but in him. They looked real, not like strays in a storm, not like ghosts, like children, like daughters. He made them a pallet in the den with every blanket and pillow he owned. Pearl curled into June, who wrapped an arm around her. Lily sat up longer, watching Sam as he moved about the room. "Are you going to send us away?" she asked. The question hit him like a fist. "No," he said, his voice firmer than he expected. "Not unless someone comes who can prove they love you more than I do." She didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped just slightly. That night, Sam sat on the porch, an old quilt over his knees, guitar in his lap. He hadn't played in years, not since the funeral. But his fingers remembered the chords like old friends. He strummed softly, and a melody filled the air one Caroline had written, while pregnant, a lullaby they never got to sing. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. Lily stepped out barefoot, her hair brushed, and eyes soft. "I know that song," she said. Sam looked at her, his throat tightening. "You do." She nodded. "My mommy used to hum it." Sam blinked. "Where'd she learn it?" he asked. Lily shrugged. She said her sister taught her. Something cold and warm swept through Sam at the same time. Caroline had a sister, estranged for years, gone without a trace. He swallowed hard. "Would you like to sing it with me?" Lily hesitated. Then she stepped closer and sat beside him. Together they played. Slowly, gently. The porch bathed in twilight and old memories. That night, Sam didn't sleep on the couch. He slept in his bed, for the first time in 6 years. And in the next room, 3 little girls dreamed beneath his roof, unaware that they'd already begun to resurrect the man he used to be. By the 3rd morning, the storm had long passed, but its memory lingered in puddles that dotted the dirt driveway, in the scent of wet cedar, and in the quiet eyes of the 3 little girls now sharing Sam Whitaker's world. Sam stood in front of the wood-burning stove, whisking eggs, with a practiced rhythm he hadn't used in years. The kitchen felt fuller, somehow, alive again. The low murmur of chairs scraping on the floor behind him, the soft tap of bare feet, the occasional cough, all small reminders that he was no longer alone. He glanced over his shoulder. Lily sat at the table quietly arranging 3 spoons in a perfect line. June was holding a napkin up to the morning light, fascinated by the way the sun poured through its threads. Pearl sat cross-legged on the floor, humming to herself. None of them spoke. Sam plated up the toast and eggs and set the food in front of them. "There we go. Farm-style breakfast." The girls ate slowly. Lily always watched the others before taking her first bite, as if making sure it was safe. June inspected everything like a scientist. Pearl nibbled like a bird. It was the 3rd day, and still no questions. No tears. Just silence. It wasn't the kind that screamed for attention. It was the kind that had lived in them too long. The kind you don't notice until someone shows you how to leave it behind. Sam tried. He asked where they were from, what school they went to, if they had any pets. Each time they looked at him like they wanted to answer but didn't know how. He didn't push. After breakfast, he gathered them by the fireplace and brought out old sketchbooks and a box of broken crayons. He laid out pages across the rug, inviting them to draw whatever they wanted. Pearl was the first to move. She crawled forward, picked up a blue crayon, and began to draw wavy lines. Ocean, maybe. Or sky. June drew a house, big, boxy, with no windows. Lily just watched. Sam sat down beside her. "You like to draw?" he asked. She nodded slowly. He handed her a pencil. "Want to try?" She took it and hesitated. Then slowly she began to sketch a face. A woman's. Long hair. Soft smile. Sam felt a weight press on his chest. "Is that your mom?" Lily paused, then nodded again. The room grew still. Outside, birds chirped in wet trees, as if trying to coax life back into the world. Later that afternoon, Sam drove into town for supplies. The girls stayed behind. He didn't want to overwhelm them just yet. He returned with bags of groceries, a set of small boots, 3 sets of matching pajamas, and 2 used bicycles from a yard sale he passed by chance. When he walked through the door, arms full, the girls looked up in unison. June gasped at the pink boots. Pearl ran to him and held onto his leg. Lily whispered, "Thank you." It was the first time she'd said more than a name. That night, Sam made cornbread from Caroline's old recipe. He added honey just like she used to. The girls devoured it. Pearl had crumbs on her nose. June asked for seconds. Lily, after a long silence, said softly, "This tastes like something I remember." Sam's heart clenched. "Maybe your mom used to make it," he said. "Maybe," she replied. But something in her eyes said it was more than that. After dinner, Sam read to them from a dusty copy of Charlotte's Web. They curled around him on the old sofa, heads resting on his shoulders, legs tangled under the same quilt. It wasn't a home yet, not fully, but it was something. Later, as he turned out the lights and checked on the girls one last time, Sam stood by the door and watched them breathe. He thought of the life he used to have, of Caroline's laugh, of the tiny pair of shoes she'd bought on a whim when the pregnancy test came back positive, of the empty nursery that had stayed locked for 6 years. He thought he had buried those memories with her, but maybe they'd been waiting for 3 little girls to show up in a storm. He didn't know what the next day would bring. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, Sam whispered a prayer. Not for answers, not for miracles, just for the strength to keep the silence from swallowing them all whole, and for the courage to keep building something new, one quiet, unspoken piece at a time. The knock came just after noon. Sam had just finished sanding down the splinters on the new porch railing when the sound echoed through the still air, 3 sharp official raps on the front door. The kind of knock that didn't ask. It announced. He wiped his hands on a rag heart already tightening. The girls were inside napping after lunch, their laughter still faintly lingering in the hallway. When he opened the door, a woman stood there, tall, straight-backed, wrapped in a government gray trench coat despite the spring warmth. Her ID badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. "Mr. Whitaker?" she asked, voice clipped and efficient. "Yes," Sam said slowly. "I'm Evelyn Hodge, Nebraska Department of Family Services." He stepped aside before she asked. She didn't smile as she entered, but her eyes scanned the room with a practiced sweep, taking in the toys by the fireplace, the folded quilts, the child-sized boots by the door. "I received a report," she said. 3 minor children, all girls, found unaccompanied during a storm. "Is that accurate?" Sam nodded. "Found them in my birthing shed. They were cold, soaked, and alone." "Why didn't you call us immediately? No signal during the storm." "By the time it cleared, I was focused on keeping them fed and warm." Evelyn scribbled something into a leather-bound notebook. Her pen moved quickly, dispassionately. "They're asleep," Sam added. "You want to see them? I'll wake them." She paused. "Not yet. I'd like to speak with you first." She sat stiffly on the edge of his couch. Sam remained standing. "Do you know the girls' names they told me? Lily, June, and Pearl. Do you know their last name?" "No. Have they mentioned any family parents?" "They haven't said much, but He hesitated. Lily said their mother used to hum a lullaby. It's the same song my wife wrote when she was pregnant. Her sister disappeared years ago. Nobody ever found her. Evelyn's brow twitched. Coincidence, maybe. Or trauma-confusing memories. We'll need to verify. I understand. What's your relationship to the girls, Mr. Whitaker? Sam's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. I didn't ask for them, he said. But I found them, and I couldn't walk away. Evelyn watched him for a long beat, then stood. Children left in the care of non-relatives must be reported within 24 hours. You're currently in violation of that protocol. They needed help. I'm not questioning your intentions, Mr. Whitaker, but intentions don't ensure safety. He felt the heat rise behind his ribs. Are you saying they're not safe here? I'm saying we need to assess that formally. At that moment, the screen door creaked open. Pearl stood in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep eyes blinking in confusion. Hi, she whispered. Evelyn turned slowly. Hello, sweetheart. I'm Evelyn. Can I talk to you for a minute? Pearl looked at Sam. It's okay, he said gently. Evelyn crouched to Pearl's level, softening her voice. Can you tell me where your mommy is? Pearl's face fell. Her lip trembled. She left, she said. Did she say where she was going? When was that? Pearl shrugged. Long time. Evelyn nodded, scribbled again, and stood. Thank you, Pearl. Can you go wake your sisters for me? Pearl nodded and patted off bare feet, whispering across the floorboards. Evelyn turned back to Sam. We'll place them in temporary state custody for now. It's procedure. No, it's not up for debate. They just started sleeping through the night. Lily just spoke. You think moving them again will help them? This isn't personal. The hell it isn't, Sam snapped. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. You're not family. I buried family, he said, voice low. I held my wife's hand in a hospital room after a drunk driver tore our lives apart. I carried our daughter's name on my chest for 6 years. Don't tell me what family is. They stared at each other in a silence so thick it nearly hummed. Then Evelyn said quietly, You'll be given a hearing. And until then, they stay with the state-approved foster placement. Sam stepped forward. No. You're interfering with an investigation. No, he repeated. I'm standing between them and another abandonment. You want to take them, you better bring a badge and a court order, and a bigger man than me to carry them out. Evelyn didn't blink. That can be arranged. She turned, opened the door, and left. The girls stood at the hallway's edge holding hands. Sam sank into the armchair, buried his face in his hands, and let the fire pop and crackle beside him. They were coming for the girls, and this time, he didn't know if love would be enough to stop them. The day after Evelyn Hodge walked out of his house, Sam felt like he was waiting for a storm that hadn't quite arrived. There was no knock on the door, no black car parked outside. But tension hung in the air like thunder behind the hills. He didn't tell the girls, didn't want them to see the shift in his voice, or the way his hand hovered slightly longer on the doorknob when he checked the front porch. But Lily saw it anyway. She always saw more than she let on. Is she coming back? She asked that evening while Sam was chopping kindling behind the barn. He paused, axe raised midair. The air was still, cool, quiet. She might, he said. But if she does, we'll talk to her. Together. Lily nodded, solemn. June peeked out from behind the woodshed. Can we help? Sam looked at the 2 small pairs of boots, now scuffed from days of wandering the pasture, and smiled. Only if you're ready to get your hands dirty. That afternoon, they chopped firewood side by side. Pearl carried the small pieces to the stack. June tried to lift the axe and nearly toppled over. Lily gathered twigs for kindling and arranged them like puzzle pieces. They were building something. Not just warmth, but trust. Belonging. That night, as the fire crackled low, Sam pulled out an old shoebox filled with photographs. He hadn't opened it in years. He let the girls look. There was Caroline smiling on the front porch in a sundress, pregnant and radiant. A picture of the nursery freshly painted yellow. One of Sam younger and full of mischief holding a hammer and looking smug after building the crib. The girl sat quietly. "That was your wife?" June asked. Sam nodded. Her name was Caroline. "Where is she now?" Pearl whispered. Sam stared at the fire. "She's gone. A long time now." Lily touched the picture of the yellow nursery. "Did you paint this for your baby?" "I did." "Did she come home?" Sam swallowed. "No." She didn't. The girls were silent, but their eyes said everything. They understood loss, not the way adults did, but deeper, with the kind of silence that speaks volumes. After they went to bed, Sam sat alone by the fire, the photo box still in his lap. He felt it then. That ache. That terrifying, beautiful ache of something waking up inside him. Something that had been asleep too long. The next morning, he decided they needed a project. "We're fixing up the old chicken coop," he declared at breakfast. "Don't care what the neighbors say, we're doing it. Might not have chickens yet, but we'll be ready." The girls giggled. Pearl clapped. He handed out gloves, hammers, paintbrushes. They cleared out cobwebs. Sanded beams painted the door a ridiculous, joyful red. Pearl got more paint on her overalls than the wall. June discovered a family of mice and named them. Lily found a bent horseshoe and insisted they hang it over the door for luck. Sam didn't say it, but he knew this wasn't about chickens. It was about proof that this place was a home again, that laughter lived here now, that someone would fight for it. That evening, a neighbor stopped by, Ed Hanley, a widower in his 70s, who ran the local feed store. He brought cookies. "Figured you had company," he said, nodding toward the porch where the girls were playing hopscotch with sidewalk chalk. Sam looked at him surprised. "You knew," Sam, Ed said with a smirk. "The town's got 200 people and one stop sign. We know when a coyote sneezes." "Of course I knew." Sam braced himself for judgment, but Ed just handed him a paper bag. "There's an old rooster at my place. Mean as hell. You want him. He's yours." Sam chuckled deeply. "Thanks, Ed." Ed turned serious. "They yours." Sam paused. Not by blood, but maybe by choice. Ed nodded. That's the only kind that matters some days. Later that night, Sam and the girls sat around a bonfire in the backyard. Marshmallows, folk songs, crickets, a breeze that smelled like pine and smoke. June asked, "Can we stay forever?" Sam didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out a hand and placed it gently on hers. Then Lily's, then Pearl's. "You can stay as long as it takes," he said, "to feel like you're home." The girls didn't cry. They just leaned in closer. And there, under a sky full of stars, Sam made a silent vow. No matter what came next, he would not let the system break them again. He'd built fences to keep pain out. But these girls had walked straight through the front gate, and in doing so, they brought with them something he thought he'd lost forever. The will to fight, the courage to hope, and the quiet beginnings of a family that had chosen each other, not by blood, not by law, but by firewood photographs and the promise of staying together. No matter the storm. The letter arrived 3 days later, creased, official, and cold. Sam found it wedged between a feed catalog and a church bulletin in the rusted mailbox at the end of the drive. He opened it right there, leaning against the gatepost beneath the wide Nebraska sky. It was from the Department of Family Services. A hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. The girls would be placed in temporary foster care pending evaluation. The state would make a best interest determination. Sam stood for a long moment, letter in hand, the wind tugging at his flannel shirt. Then he folded the paper, slid it into his back pocket, and walked home. He didn't tell the girls not yet. Not until he had a plan. Instead, he kept their days full. School lessons in the morning, coupe repairs after lunch, stories at night. Pearl had learned to braid. June asked questions about everything. Lily had taken to drawing the old barn from different angles, filling pages with quiet, careful lines. Each moment felt urgent, as if trying to outrun the clock. The day before the hearing, Sam took the girls into town for the first time. They wore the dresses he'd found in Caroline's cedar chest, patched and freshly laundered. He'd brushed their hair that morning, kneeling on the porch, with fingers gentler than he'd thought possible. They visited Ed Hanley's feed store, then the diner, where Mabel, the owner, gave them each a piece of pie on the house. Town folks watched, some with warmth, others with curiosity, but no one said a word against them. That night, Sam sat alone at the kitchen table, suit jacket draped over the chair, tie half knotted. His hands shook. He hadn't stepped inside a courtroom since Caroline's funeral. He felt like he was preparing for a battle he didn't believe he deserved to win. The girls had changed everything, but the law didn't care about cornbread and bedtime stories. It cared about signatures, bloodlines, paperwork. Sam had none of that. What he did have was love. But he wasn't sure if that would be enough. The hearing took place in the old county courthouse. The building smelled like mildew and floor wax, the kind of place where things ended more often than they began. Evelyn Hodge was there, crisp and unreadable in a gray suit. So was a judge, white-haired with eyes like carved stone, a court clerk, a state-appointed child advocate, and Sam. The girls waited outside in the hallway with Ed, who had insisted on coming. "I've seen calves sold with more compassion than they give in these places," he muttered. Inside, the judge asked questions. So many questions. When did you find the children? Why did you not immediately report? What legal claim do you have? What do you know of their background, their needs? Sam answered each question plainly, honestly. He didn't pretend to be more than he was. "I'm not their blood," he said, voice steady. "I'm not their guardian. I'm just the man who found them. But I've fed them, clothed them, held them when they cried. And I love them. I would give everything I have for them, and then give more." The child advocate spoke next. She'd spent time with the girls the day before. Her voice was soft. They're calm, grounded. "They speak of Sam as Dad," Lily said, and I quote, "He makes us feel like we matter." That kind of attachment. Your honor is rare after trauma. I believe removing them now would cause significant emotional harm. Evelyn cleared her throat. "Regardless of sentiment the law requires?" "I know what the law requires, Ms. Hodge," the judge said, interrupting. Then he looked at Sam. Long and hard. "What do you believe makes a father, Mr. Whitaker?" Sam's breath caught. He looked down at his calloused hands, then up again. "A father is someone who stays, who shows up every day even when it's hard. Someone who chooses you, again and again. That's what I do. That's what I'll keep doing, as long as I'm allowed." Silence. Then the judge leaned back and folded his hands. "I will not make a final ruling today," he said. "The girls will remain in Mr. Whitaker's care, under provisional custody, until a full family assessment is completed. The state will monitor, but not remove." Evelyn opened her mouth. The judge held up a hand. "Ms. Hodge, you've made your case. Now I'm making mine." Sam exhaled, barely hearing the rest. It wasn't over. But for now they had time. He stepped into the hallway, where 3 little girls jumped up at once, eyes wide. "Well?" Lily asked. Sam knelt. "We get to go home," he said. Pearl squealed. June hugged his neck. Lily stood quiet for a moment longer, then whispered, "I knew they'd see it, that we're already a family." Sam smiled, tears burning behind his eyes. And for the first time since the storm, he believed it too. Rain returned to the prairie 2 nights after the hearing. Not a storm, not a warning, just a soft, steady curtain that fell like a benediction on the land. It tapped gently against the windows of the Whitaker farmhouse as Sam stood in the kitchen slicing apples for a pie the girls had requested. They had requested a lot lately. Can we make a treehouse? Can Pearl have a kitten? Can we sleep in the living room all together? And Sam, more often than not, found himself saying yes. That night, as the rain pattered against the roof, Lily sat at the old upright piano in the living room, her fingers hovering uncertainly above the chipped ivory keys. The piano hadn't been touched in years, not since Caroline. Sam leaned in the doorway, wiping his hands on a towel, watching. "Do you play?" he asked. She shrugged. "A little. Mommy used to teach us." "Go ahead," he said softly. Lily looked at her sisters, who had curled up with a blanket and a picture book nearby. Then she began to play. The melody was halting at first, then clearer a tune Sam knew instantly. The lullaby. Caroline's song. He walked across the room like in a dream and knelt beside her. "Where did you learn that?" Lily hesitated. "My mommy said her sister wrote it." Sam's breath hitched. She said she used to sing it before she went away. Sam sat back, slowly, heart-hammering. Do you know your mommy's name?" Emma Lily said. Emma Rose. The room fell into stunned silence. The name echoed like thunder in Sam's ears. Emma Rose was Caroline's sister, the sister who had disappeared 16 years ago. The girl their family had given up looking for. The girl Sam had only met, once shy, creative, with sad eyes that mirrored Caroline's in softer hues. Rose left the room and returned a moment later with a box from the hall closet. Inside were photos, faded, bent at the corners. He flipped through them until he found the one he was looking for, a girl with long hair laughing on a picnic blanket beside Caroline. He handed it to Lily. "Is this her?" Lily's eyes widened. "That's Mommy. But she looks younger." Sam sat heavily on the couch. The fire crackled behind him. His hands trembled slightly in his lap. It was her. There was no doubt now. The girls were Caroline's nieces. He didn't know how Emma had vanished into the folds of the world or what life she had endured before it led to this. But now the pieces began to make sense. The song, the eyes, the ache. He called Ed the next morning and told him everything. Ed didn't say much, just drove out an hour later, with strong coffee and a folded newspaper. "Best get ahead of this before the state does," he said, handing Sam the classifieds. "Might be someone out there who knows more than they've said." Sam nodded. Later that week, a local journalist, Laura Bell, came to the house. Ed had contacted her quietly. She was in her 50s, smart, discreet, and carried a notebook with reverence. Sam told her the story. She listened carefully, pausing only once to ask, "Do you believe they were meant to find you?" Sam looked toward the living room where the girls were drawing chalk rainbows on the wood floor. "I don't know," he said. "But I believe they're home." The article came out 2 days later. A full-page spread in the Sunday edition. A song through the rain. 1 man, 3 girls, and the family he didn't know. He had. The story struck a nerve. Letters poured in, some from neighbors, others from strangers. Donations, offers of support, prayers written in shaky cursive. One envelope came from a woman in Illinois who had known Emma at a shelter years ago. She remembered the song, the drawing talent, the mention of a sister named Caroline. There was even a letter from a lawyer offering to help Sam formalize guardianship. The girls didn't understand the scope of it, but they understood the smiles, the safety, the way people began waving when they walked through town. One evening, June asked, "Does this mean we're real?" Sam turned, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean, like real family. Not just pretend." Sam knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "You were never pretend," he said. "You're the most real thing that's ever happened to me." And in that moment, he believed it more deeply than anything he'd ever known. He didn't know what the road ahead would hold. There were still hearings, forms, bureaucracies. But something had shifted. What had begun as a rescue was now becoming redemption. For him. For the girls. Maybe even for Emma, wherever she was. The rain had stopped. The prairie air hung heavy and sweet, scented with damp soil and budding hay. Morning light filtered through low clouds, turning the sky into a silver sheet that promised something, though no one could say quite what. Sam rose early that Sunday, long before the girls stirred. He moved quietly through the kitchen, brewed a pot of coffee, and stepped out onto the porch. The silence was complete, save for the faint rustle of cottonwoods down by the creek. He carried a folded letter in his breast pocket, the one from the lawyer who had read about them in the paper. She had offered to take the case pro bono. Her handwriting was firm and kind, the kind that made you feel held just by looking at it. He hadn't responded yet. Something in him still hesitated, not out of doubt, but a strange reverence. As if putting it all on paper would make the fragile beauty of their life too official, too final, like trapping fireflies in a jar. Behind him, the door creaked. Daddy Lily's voice was sleepy and soft. Sam turned. "Morning, Bug. You're up early." She padded toward him barefoot, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Had a dream," she mumbled. "Mommy was singing." Sam smoothed her hair and said nothing. They watched the horizon for a while together, the girl's head leaning against his flannel shirt. And for a moment, all the years of loss and fear seemed to fold quietly into the light. That afternoon, Laura Bell returned. She brought a pie lemon meringue this time, and a stack of books for the girls. "They've been on my shelf too long," she said. Time someone read them again. The girls pounced on the stories, like puppies, dragging them to the porch and spreading them across the swing. Pearl found one about fireflies. June wanted the one with horses. Lily clutched a book of poems to her chest. Sam poured iced tea, and he and Laura sat on opposite ends of the porch, sun-dappled and warm. "You never said you were a musician," she said, nodding toward the open window where the piano stood visible. "I'm not," he smiled. Caroline was. The girls, they brought it back to life. Laura studied him for a moment. "You know," she said, setting her glass down, "I've been writing for papers 30 years. I've covered fires, floods, scandals, even a prison wedding once. But that story, about you, about them, I've never had such a response." He looked at her, surprised. "People crave hope, Sam," she continued. "They don't want perfect. They want real. And what's more real than a man doing the right thing when no one's watching?" He looked down, face suddenly flushed. "I didn't do it for a story. I know," she said. "That's why it matters." They were quiet after that. A train's whistle drifted across the distant fields. "You ever think about what's next?" Laura asked finally. Sam exhaled slowly. "Every day," he said. "But I don't plan much. I fix what's broken. Feed who's hungry. Try not to mess it up." Laura smiled gently. "That sounds like a plan to me." That night after the girls were asleep, Sam wandered into the barn. Something about the cool dark called to him. He passed the empty stall that had once housed Caroline's mare. The far corner still smelled faintly of hay and saddle oil. As he moved deeper into the barn, a glimmer caught his eye. It was the old lantern, the one that had been there the night he found the girls. He lifted it, ran a thumb across the glass. It still worked. He lit it and set it gently on the workbench. Its warm amber glow flickered across the rafters like a memory. Something compelled him to open the cupboard beneath the bench, a place he hadn't touched in years. Inside were dusty boxes of nails, a cracked horseshoe, and a worn leather folio. He pulled the folio out. Inside were Caroline's sketches, pages of music, scribbled lyrics, pressed flowers, and near the back a letter, addressed but never sent. To Emma. His breath stopped. The letter spoke of forgiveness, of love never lost, of hope that maybe her little sister would come home. Sam sat in the stillness of the barn, the lantern casting soft light on words that now echoed through time. He folded the letter and placed it back inside. The girls had come not just for shelter, but as an answer. A miracle folded in the rain. He left the barn quietly cradling the folio like a sacred thing. Back inside the house was silent. Only the tick of the clock and the occasional creak of floorboards spoke. He peeked into the girls' room. 3 small bodies tangled in blankets. June's arm across Lily's stomach. Pearl holding a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Sam stood in the doorway for a long time. Then he turned. Laura was there, standing in the hallway, her hand resting on the doorframe. "I forgot my notebook," she whispered. Their eyes met. She saw the folio in his hand, the dust on his sleeves, the softness in his face that hadn't been there a month ago. And she didn't ask anything more. She just walked over, took his free hand in hers and said, "You look like someone who just remembered the way home." Sam smiled faintly. Maybe I did. 2 weeks had passed since Sam discovered Caroline's letter to Emma. The days moved gently now, like the hush after a long storm. The girls had settled into their new rhythm mornings of homeschool lessons at the kitchen table, afternoons building forts in the hayloft, or chasing chickens barefoot through the yard. Sam, though still haunted by the weight of the past, began to breathe more easily. Even sleep came easier, now that the nights were filled with the quiet thrum of belonging. One evening, as a crisp breeze hinted at the first shift toward autumn, Laura returned, not with her notebook this time, but with her arms full of fabric. "I have a crazy idea," she said, grinning. "Quilting." "Ever tried?" Sam raised an eyebrow. "I'm more of a hammer and nails guy." "You cut, I sew," she said with a wink. "Let's make a memory quilt." It became a project. The girls helped gather pieces, a square of Caroline's old flannel, a bit of denim, from Sam's jeans lace, from one of Laura's childhood dresses. They even found a tattered scarf in the barn that, after some washing, turned out to be part of Emma's long-lost wardrobe. Laura stitched it all by hand, each square sewn with quiet intention. One afternoon, as the girls played outside, Laura sat by the hearth working, and Sam brought her tea. "You ever think Caroline would have liked this?" she asked, not looking up. Sam smiled faintly. "She would have teased me for getting sentimental, then helped you pick the colors." Laura glanced at him, her smile soft. "She's still here, you know." "In all of this?" Sam nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm starting to believe that." There was a quiet moment, the kind only 2 people who've lived enough loss can sit in comfortably. Then Laura folded a corner of the quilt back and paused. "What's this?" There, tucked into the hem of Emma's scarf, was something small and crinkled. Sam leaned closer. It was a note. Folded once, yellowed at the edges. Laura handed it to him gently, her fingers brushing his. Their eyes met, and for a breath neither said a word. He opened the note. The handwriting was unmistakable Emma's. It wasn't long. A single paragraph. "If this ever finds anyone especially, you, Sam, know that I tried. I never meant to disappear. I just didn't know how to stay. The world was loud and I was afraid. I left them because I thought they'd be safer without me. If I was wrong, please, give them music. Give them light. Give them what I couldn't hold on to." Sam's hands trembled. He passed the note to Laura and stood walking to the window. Outside, the girls were chasing butterflies with tinfoil wands. "I was angry at her for so long," he said, voice low. But reading this, I just feel sad. For her. For all the years she thought she wasn't enough. Laura came to stand beside him. Shame makes us do strange things, she said. Even disappear. Sam turned to her. You think she ever really stopped loving them? No. Laura said, I think she loved them more than anything. She just didn't know how to be whole. The quiet that followed held something new. Not grief, but grace. The next morning, Sam took the girls into town. They visited the diner for pancakes, then stopped at the library, where Ed met them with a brown envelope. Had this in records for a while, he said, tapping the folder. Thought you might want it. Inside were birth certificates, Lily, June, and Pearl, filed under Emma Rose Whitaker. Sam's breath caught. Whitaker. She hadn't changed her name. Why would she do that? He asked. Ed shrugged, though his eyes were soft. Maybe she never stopped believing she belonged somewhere. Sam said nothing, just pulled the envelope tight to his chest. That evening, Laura returned to deliver the finished quilt. It's not perfect, she said, but neither is life. They spread it out across the girls' beds, and the three little faces lit up with awe. You made us a blanket of memories, June squealed. It smells like Daddy's barn, and Cinnamon Pearl said, snuggling in. Lily traced a finger across one of the squares, pausing at the piece of scarf. This was hers, wasn't it? She whispered. Sam nodded. It was. Lily looked up, her expression unreadable. Then she said, she was scared. But we're not. Not anymore. Sam pulled them all into a hug. Laura stood nearby, arms crossed, smiling through tears. And for the first time in a long while, Sam didn't feel like a man trying to fill someone else's shoes. He felt like himself, whole, flawed, and exactly where he needed to be. Later that night, after Laura had gone, and the girls were fast asleep beneath their patchwork, Sam sat alone on the porch, lantern in hand. He read Emma's note again, and this time he whispered a promise into the night. They've got light now, Em, and music, and more love than they'll ever know what to do with. Then, as if in reply, the wind carried a soft sound through the trees, a faint, familiar melody. Caroline's lullaby, or maybe Emma's, or maybe something entirely new. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, let himself believe that healing didn't always come all at once, but stitch by stitch, light by light, like the quiet making of a quilt no one ever meant to start, but couldn't stop once love got involved. The town of Rockwood was small enough that you knew when someone's porch light stayed on too long, or when the old barn on Willow Ridge began to glow again after years of silence. By the time October rolled in, word had spread like morning mist. The Whitaker place was alive again. Not with ghosts or grief, but with laughter, clinking dishes, and little girls who sang to the stars. The fall festival arrived on the second Saturday of the month, just as the leaves began to catch fire in shades of gold and amber. It had always been a modest gathering, local vendors, a bake-off, and the annual lantern parade around the square. But this year, something felt different, as if the town itself had exhaled, sensing a change not just in the weather, but in the people. Sam hadn't planned on going. He'd never liked crowds. But when June handed him a homemade flyer, she'd drawn in crayon, complete with crooked pumpkins, smiling faces, and one square labeled Daddy Sings. He didn't have much of a choice. You're performing now, Laura teased, as they stood near the pie booth that morning. I think I've been drafted, he muttered, holding up the flyer like evidence. Laura laughed. Better warm up, cowboy. The girls wore matching autumn dresses with flannel capes. Pearl had insisted on tying orange ribbons in all their hair. Lily carried her tin lantern like a sacred relic, and June buzzed around, collecting fallen leaves for decoration purposes. Sam watched them from a distance, hands buried in his jacket pockets, wondering how life could change so completely and so quietly. He caught Laura looking at him. What he asked? "You've changed," she said. He smirked. "Is that a compliment?" "It's the truth." There was something in her voice, not flirtation, not admiration, but something older and deeper. Recognition. A quiet seeing. "They brought me back to life," he said softly. Laura nodded but didn't look away. "You brought them back, too." That evening, the square filled with neighbors. Kids darted between booths with caramel apples and kettle corn. A bluegrass band played beneath string lights that blinked like old memories. Sam stood behind the small outdoor stage, nervously adjusting his guitar strap. "I haven't played in front of people since Caroline's memorial," he said, more to himself than to Laura, who stood beside him, holding the songbook. "You're not playing for them," she said. "You're playing for the girls. And for you." The girls sat in the front row, glowing lanterns at their feet, hands folded like tiny saints. June gave him 2 thumbs up. Sam stepped forward. The crowd quieted. He didn't introduce himself, just strummed the first chord and let the notes carry him. The song was simple, a lullaby Caroline used to hum when she made pancakes. Half the town didn't recognize it, but the girls did. And when he reached the bridge, Lily, without prompting, stood up and joined in. Then June, then Pearl. 3 6-year-old voices, wobbly but brave, wove themselves around their fathers and filled the air with something that wasn't just music, it was testimony. When they finished, the crowd erupted, not with noise but with stillness, that sacred kind. Then applause, long and loud. Some even stood. Tears tracked down faces that had forgotten how to cry. Later, as the lantern parade wound through the square, Laura and Sam walked behind the girls. Their lanterns swayed with each step, casting ripples of light on the pavement. "Didn't think I'd ever be part of something like this again," he said. "You never stopped being part of this town," she replied. "You just needed time." Sam hesitated. "Laura, do you ever wonder what comes next all the time?" He looked at her, more vulnerable than he'd meant to be. "I used to think life ended when the barn got quiet, but now—" He trailed off, unsure. She placed a hand on his arm. "Now it's just beginning." They reached the corner near the library where the parade paused for photos. A woman with salt and pepper hair approached. Mrs. Holcomb, retired schoolteacher. Widow. She held a thermos of cider and a look of determination. "Young man," she said to Sam. "I've been watching." Sam blinked. "Ma'am, you've got the makings of a family," she said. "Don't let the past tell you otherwise." She walked away without waiting for a reply. Laura chuckled. "You've been officially approved by the Council of Wise Elders." "I guess that makes it official," he said, smiling. They stood in silence again, watching the girls spin in circles with their lanterns. "You know," Laura said after a beat, "there's a barn behind my old house in Clover Valley. Roofs falling and windows busted. But I always dreamed of fixing it up." Sam looked sideways at her. "I'm pretty handy with barns," he said. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Just a glance that said, "Not yet, but soon." And that was enough. That night, as Sam tucked the girls into bed, quilt pulled up to their chins, stuffed animals all accounted for, Lily whispered, "Was that a dream?" "No, sweetheart," he said, brushing hair from her forehead. It was real. Outside, the barn stood tall in the moonlight. The lantern still hung on the nail inside. But now it glowed. Snow had not yet fallen, but frost curled over the windows of the Whitaker farmhouse like lacework. Sam rose early that morning, as he always did now, not from habit, but from joy. Quiet joy. The kind you don't shout about but carry with you in silence. Downstairs, the smell of cinnamon and coffee greeted him. Pearl had tried to make toast again, burnt edges and all. June was humming in the hallway, brushing a doll's hair, with a seriousness usually reserved for doctors. Lily sat by the fire, tracing her finger across a quilt square stitched from her mother's scarf. Laura had spent the night her second time doing so. She wasn't rushing anything. Neither was Sam. But when she poured him coffee that morning, their hands brushed, and neither pulled away. In that single touch was a shared understanding. They weren't starting something they had already started. "Big day," she said, glancing at the barn through the frosted window. Sam nodded. "Feels like closing a chapter, or maybe opening one." The barn had stood for nearly 100 years. It had weathered lightning and rain, abandonment, and grief. But today it would hold something else entirely: music, family memory, and light. The town had helped. Laura wrote the story for the local paper, and volunteers came out in waves, painting the siding, repairing the old beams, and replacing the shattered panes with handmade stained glass. One of the windows had a redbird etched into it. Lily said it looked just like the one that perched on Emma's old windowsill. Sam didn't argue. Tonight the barn would host its first winter gathering. Sam hadn't invited anyone, but the whole town was coming anyway. By sunset, the barn shimmered like a dream from some other life. Lanterns flickered on each beam, the rafters wrapped in soft string lights. The quilt hung near the stage, not as decor, but as testimony. A testament of every thread that held them together. The girls had dressed themselves in matching wool sweaters. June added glitter to her cheeks. Pearl wore a bow the size of a small country, and Lily clutched a folded paper in her hand. "Can I read something tonight?" she asked. "Of course," Sam said, bending to her height. "You're braver than I ever was at 6. It's for Mama, and Caroline, and for you too." Sam swallowed hard. "I'd be honored." As the townspeople filed in, Ed from the library, Mrs. Holcomb with her infamous cider, even the Thompsons who once doubted him, Sam felt something shift. Not pride, not relief. Belonging. Lily stepped onto the small wooden platform as the room quieted. She opened her paper with trembling fingers, then looked up. Once there was a barn that forgot it was special, she began, her voice steady. It sat alone in the dark, thinking no one would ever come back. But one day, 3 little girls brought their laughter, and their daddy brought his songs. And the barn remembered. She paused. And so did we. Silence, then applause, but not the loud kind. The kind that ripples slow and deep like rain falling on a quiet pond. Sam took the stage, next guitar slung over his shoulder. Laura stood nearby, camera in hand, heart in her eyes. He played the lullaby again, but this time the girls didn't join in. They stood beside him, holding the lantern. Together. At the final note, Sam looked out at the crowd and said, "Thank you for seeing us." The words weren't rehearsed, just true. Later, after the guests had gone and the last pie tin was cleared, Sam and Laura stood in the barn, alone. The lantern still glowed on the nail near the window. Outside, snow began to fall just lightly enough to make everything feel still. "I think they saved me," Sam said quietly. Laura nodded. "I know they did." He turned to her. "I used to think I was too broken to try again, with anything, but now." He reached into his jacket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Unfolding it, he revealed Emma's letter, the one they found in the quilt. "I kept it," he said. "Not because I'm holding on, but because it reminds me what letting go really means." Laura stepped closer. "What do you think she'd say if she saw this?" Sam smiled faintly. She'd probably laugh at the lights and the quilts, but she'd stay. For the music, for the girls, and for you. The silence between them swelled, not with absence, but with everything they hadn't yet said. And finally, Sam reached out and took her hand. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It just was. They walked back to the house, the snow crunching under their boots. The porch light was on, soft and golden. Inside, the girls had fallen asleep in a tangle on the couch, the quilt draped over them like a benediction. Sam paused at the doorway, looking back once more at the barn, now quiet again. But not empty, not forgotten, just resting. Tomorrow there'd be more chores, more songs, more math homework and missing socks and scraped knees. But tonight, the thunder was gone. And in its place, peace. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder. They arrive quietly in the form of small hands, soaked shoes, and eyes still full of hope. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave us a comment and let us hear your voice. And if you believe the world needs more kindness, more second chances, and more stories like this, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Until next time, may your heart always find shelter in the storm, and may love always lead you home.